Thank you very much. Yes, so the where of everything. I want to sort of try to make the case that actually what we do today as geospatial technologists has become so commonplace, so much used by society, that it's become ambient. It's part of what we do. It's almost invisible to us. And that, in some ways, might be seen as a negative thing. But actually, it's very positive. The fact that what we do has largely become invisible, subsumed by other industries, subsumed by society, actually is hugely important. It means that what we do is more relevant, more important than perhaps it's ever been before in our history. And I want to talk a little bit about me first of all. I think I've had a very nice introduction. I started off as a geographer, got involved in computing, was an academic, a civil servant, Ordnance Survey, now work at the Ordnance Survey. But you worked at the Ordnance Survey, now work at Google. But more than anything else, I'm a technologist. I believe in the value of technology, that technology is fundamental at solving the world's problems and is actually a huge benefit in improving our lives. So I will always default back to a technology solution saying, yes, given the appropriate technology, we can do something. I'm also a keen aviation enthusiast, so I'll often use examples and references from aviation, so please forgive me for that. So what I want you to talk about is the where of everything, and actually this boils down to just two things. There will be two messages. The first is this idea of the world in your pocket, and I'll tell you what I mean by that at the beginning, and then secondly, the end of computers, which may sound again counterintuitive for someone who claims to be a technologist, that saying computers will finish, we won't use them anymore. Good job there's no one here from computer vendors. Okay, the world in your pocket then, the first thing. How many people used a map like that in the last week? Very good. How many people used a paper map in the last 6 months? Slightly bigger group. The last year? Yeah, about the same. So I think we're going to get to kind of maximum penetration, being about 2/3 of the audience used the paper map perhaps in the last year or so. How many people used a map on their smartphone in the last week? I've already beaten the paper maps, okay? In the last year, we probably all used a map on our smartphone. Smartphones have been a massive innovation. I'm going to talk about them a little bit more. But one of the key apps, the thing that we keep going back to our smartphone to use, is the fact that they have a map. The Google Maps application is one of those few applications that have been downloaded over 1 billion times. And it's one of those applications that people use. If they don't use it every day, they use it every other day, or it's something that you go back to using. And yes, you could replace Apple Maps or Yahoo Maps or whoever else. You know, it's the mapping app in your smartphone. It's one of those ones that you use quite often. You use it quite a lot. And I think it's easy for us to think, oh, well, I remember the paper map, and my app on my smartphone is just the digital version of that. It's the digital version of the street map or the tourist map of Amsterdam. But actually, it's much more than that. Much, much more than that. Here's one of my first aviation links. The paper map is, I would argue, the equivalent of the balloon. The balloon was our first way of flying. It took us from A to B if the wind was blowing in the right direction. And indeed today, if we want to, we can still take balloon rides. It's not disappeared, it's still possible. The smartphone is the equivalent of the A350, the airliner. The smartphone map has so much more capability compared to the paper map. It's like comparing a balloon to a jet airliner. They are vastly different. The capability of what you can do with a map on your smartphone compared to what you could do on a paper map is just enormous. it all started out with this, the iPhone. Now, there were smartphones before the iPhone, but we have to accept the fact that the iPhone was the thing that changed people's thinking and introduced really the concept of what the smartphone was. And if we remember back, anyone remember what year was the iPhone introduced? 2008, very good. 2008, the same year, incidentally, that the Inspire legislation became law in the United Kingdom. I will draw no more meaning than that. Now, it's hugely influential. You know, we all have smartphones, and we'll come back to the importance of smartphones in a moment. We're up to about 1.4 billion smartphones have been sold. This is figures coming from IDC up until the end of last year. And often, when we think about smartphones and we talk about smartphones, and indeed when smartphones were introduced, what we focus on more than anything else is their design. And we'll say, oh, you know, this has got a 8 megapixel camera, and it's got these nice smooth edges, and this one's got a wireless charging, and this one's made of titanium, and this one's made of unicorn hair. You know, it's fabulous, you know, and that's what we think about. That's what we concentrate on, the design of the device. And there's, you know, Sir Johnny Ive in his white background room. He only ever lives in a room that's completely white, and he will talk in, you know, terms for hours and hours on the greatness of the design of the latest version of the iPhone, or, you know, for iPhone, read whatever other smartphone you want to think about. And that's what we focus on. We focus on the thing, the physical device that we hold in our hands. But actually, I think we're missing a point when we do that. And to prove we're missing a point, I want to go back to the original introduction of the iPhone back in 2008, one of Steve Jobs' greatest presentations. And I just want to show you one clip from that event. So Steve's saying, I'm now going to demonstrate on my iPhone, which we've just announced, Google Maps. And he launches Google Maps. Remember, the internet then was almost as fast as it is here in this room. So he says, where are we? Here we are in Moscone West, which was the conference centre where the iPhone launch event was taking place. And what he's going to do now, and we all take this for granted, is he's going to search for Starbucks. And if you wondered why we always search for Starbucks, this is where it all started. You know, the original first time someone searched for Starbucks. Up come a load of Starbucks restaurants in the neighbourhood. This is San Francisco, so there are loads and loads of Starbucks. He clicks on one and he dials the number and he jokingly asks, can you send 4,000 lattes? Ha ha, that's all very funny. Most of this was complete smoke and mirrors. If he'd have searched for anything else, it wouldn't have worked. The actual dialing of the telephone number wasn't actually dialing at all, because the phone part of the functionality of the iPhone didn't work at that point, and so it was all the recording. But what this really did was to open people's minds up to the power of what you could do with a smartphone. And it wasn't the actual device itself that was powerful. It was that it was connecting to the internet and making use of tools and services and information that was available on the internet that you could not possibly put just on the device itself. And what makes a smartphone smart is the fact that it's connected to the internet. So actually, when we think about smartphones, we shouldn't think about the design. We should think of them as terminals, just pieces of computing equipment that connect to the most powerful invention we've ever had, the web, the internet. And this is a graphic display of the internet, which, you know, how can you draw a picture of the internet? It's very difficult, it's very hard to do. The different colours there represent the networks. Remember, the internet is just a network of networks. The different colours here represent the location. So blue areas are the United States, the green areas are Europe, Latin America is that magenta colour, Asia Pacific is red, and Africa is orange. So you can see mostly Europe, Middle East, Africa, not surprising. But actually, it is global. Even there from that graphic, you can kind of pick out the fact that Everywhere is represented. And what that actually is a picture of lots and lots of connections, lots and lots of people, devices, all connected to each other, all creating information, potentially being sensors, people having different opinions. It's an enormous, very powerful resource of information that somehow we need to plug into. And obviously the way that we plug into it now is more than ever through our mobile devices. There are actually today 6 billion devices connected to the internet. A large majority of those, remember we saw the 1.4 billion smartphones, are mobile devices, and that's a number that's increasing. 6 billion devices, roughly 30 exabytes of storage. Huge volume of storage, videos, documents, everything you can imagine, all online. All online and available and accessible to us with these little terminals that we carry around with them. It's also a network of people. It's a network of groups, of individuals, communities that want to do things. And from the mapping point of view, there are things like, the OpenStreetMap community. This is Google's MapMaker community. They do 10,000 edits per day on the Google map, covering 230 countries around the world. So the map today is something that is being updated every day by lots, big communities of users. There are more users connecting to OpenStreetMap, to Google MapMaker, than there are professional employees of all the national mapping agencies combined. It's a very different world of people not just seeing a map as something that is delivered to them, but something that they can contribute to, that's important to them. It's part of their world. It's not something that's external to them. And that view of people being part of the solution works in a number of different ways. It's very obvious when you're sitting in front of a computer screen and you're perhaps digitizing a new road that was missing, or you're changing the opening hours of your favorite museum or restaurant because it was wrong in the database. But that same contribution of information appears in different ways. If you use Google Maps here in Amsterdam, or actually if you use probably any of the smartphone applications, you'll find that there is now real-time traffic information. And that traffic information is coming from your mobile phones, from you just traveling around with a mobile phone in your car, or you using public transport, and anonymously contributing speed information for the particular piece of road that you're on. That information is redrawn perhaps every 2 or 3 minutes. Think about that. We're creating a new map of the Netherlands every 2 or 3 minutes. Completely new, completely refreshed with the current state of the situation at that point in time. We used to joke at the Ordnance Survey that we'd have a change on the map within 90 days. Now you have a change on the map within 90 seconds. That's how this process has changed. And that, if you like, is contributing information not proactively. It's happening as we move along. You could be more proactive. There's an equivalent application called Waze that allows you to contribute information about the world around you in the sense of a game. There's a gamification element to this. So you, as a driver, have a little icon that you associate with you, and you can see where your friends are driving around. You can update information about events, where there's roadworks, where there might be policemen looking after an accident. Here you're playing a much more active role, contributing information, putting that information back up into the cloud for other people to share. So there's this virtuous circle now around the creation and use of mapping information. Easy to contribute, I say, information about there's a traffic jam, an accident, there's a policeman there with a speed camera. The legality of that varies in different parts of the world. Most places it's still legal. And that ability to identify your information has radically changed as well since the original iPhone, which came with just GPS. Now we use GPS in combination with the Wi-Fi radio in your device, in cooperation with the cell towers locally, to give you your information almost regardless of where you are. So probably today, if you pulled out your iPhone and you had a look and you pressed the little icon that says show me where I am, it would accurately identify the fact you were in the hotel at this point in time, because we can use all those technologies together. We're not reliant just on GNSS, for example, or just on cell tower. And for the application developer, someone building an application sitting on the top, they don't have to worry about this. You just say, tell me where the phone is, tell me where my device is, and that location's presented to them. And that, more than anything else, has grown the market for things like Uber or pizza delivery services, or all of those applications that are so valuable and so useful. What we've done is to take what still is, very sophisticated, very complex technology and hidden it. So the application developer doesn't have to worry about the vagaries of GNSS and multiband and all that complexity of multi-path modeling inside a building. That's hidden. They just get the location, and that's all that they need. So I could be in Schiphol Airport and I could be identified exactly where I am, which heading I'm going from, which particular gate I'm going to. And an airport as big as Schiphol actually being located indoors is very valuable. And this is perhaps one of the big growth areas for our industry, is taking a lot of what we've learned outside, bringing it indoors and having those same capabilities. Connects to the BIM work that James was talking about earlier. That's kind of looking at the network potential. Look at the storage capability of the internet. This is time-lapse imagery of the city of Las Vegas over a period of about 20 years. You can see amazing growth there. This is coming from a tool called Google Earth Engine, where we've taken all of the Landsat archive, all of the MODIS archive for the last 30 years, put it online on a website that you can go and interact anywhere in the world and see that change animated over the period of time. And again, it's one of those examples where visualization of something in a very non-abstract sense provides a huge amount of meaning to people. And it comes from that capability of having all of that storage online and then just showing you the piece of the world that you want to look at. Again, it's something that's not possible without the cloud, without all that massive capability accessible to you, but suddenly it allows you to communicate in a way that is very meaningful, very direct to people. And that ability to store lots more information is going to be important to us in the geospatial sense as we begin to see more and more Earth observation data available to you. These are two of the satellites that Skybox, a company that Google acquired a couple of years ago, are currently building. They've been built in a very kind of low-tech, it appears from the outside, office complex in Palo Alto. They're both about the size of the fridge you have in your hotel room. That's how big they are. They're relatively small, but they can capture sub-meter accuracy or sub-meter resolution Earth observation data for the planet. We're getting to the point now where the cost of Earth observation satellites are in the realms where a commercial company could build one. Universities are currently building one. It's not without, out of, all extents that, in a few years' time, maybe Trimble will be selling Earth observation satellites for companies that are interested to buy. It's reducing in cost and complexity that quickly. Unfortunately, the physics of putting one of those things into space is still really difficult. We haven't been able to beat Newtonian physics. Getting, a kilogram of satellite into Earth orbit is still very, very expensive. But the satellites themselves are getting very much cheaper. And because there are more in space, there's much more data that's being created and being accessed. And how you access it now is via the internet. It's not a case of, getting a DVD or a tape in the post anymore. That same ability to store imagery is very much focused now on terrestrial imagery. If you look at what Google stores in terms of the geospatial imagery we have, the vast majority of the imagery, many petabytes, is terrestrial imagery captured at ground level for street view. It's much more volume than there is in satellite imagery. And this is much more valuable in many ways because it's much more natural for us to see the world like this. We always look at street view as that last level of zoom. We've pretty much, covered, the vast majority of the populated places of the world with this street view imagery. We're now kind of moving on to capturing places that you might never visit. So this is street view imagery of Mont Blanc. We put a very small street view camera on a mountaineer. They went climbing up to the summit of Mont Blanc. You can then experience that from your laptop, or using these kind of cheap virtual reality glasses, you can experience it within a classroom and share that experience as a kind of a virtual field trip. Now, I must admit, I'm a little bit of a toy train fan. Who had a toy train when they were young? Yeah, who made models? Okay, I'm just going to show you a video that you'll like just for a few minutes because it will take you back to your childhood. This is the Wonderland, I suppose, tourist attraction, but it's like the world's biggest model train set. And what we thought would be fun is if we could produce a street view version of this world as well as the real world. We did this just before Christmas. So I'll just show you a little bit of this video. This is the guy, the model makers. Listen, I think mine's a good job, but actually I'd really like to do this. Spend all day making model train sets. Fabulous, what a great. And so what we did was to build a little model street view car, put that into the model world, and then take it driving. And so the imagery you now see, you can go online to see this, is the street view imagery of the model world that reflects the street view imagery of the real world. Now, this is lovely. How did we do it? Well, what we actually didn't do was shrink the technology of a real street view car down to a little model and drive that around. It's a nice story. It would be great if we could do that, but actually that's not how it works. How it works is you actually still do the miniaturization, but you put a little miniature camera on the model train and you drive the model train around. Now these miniature cameras now, the things that used to be something that you put on top of a car, are now easily accessible. There's one that you can connect to your mobile phone, made by Ricoh, and you can plug it into the Street View app on your mobile phone and capture Street View imagery personally wherever you are traveling. And this is a Street View image of this very room that I captured earlier on this morning. We can have a look at this online a little bit later if the internet connection was a bit quicker. But it shows you how much this technology has changed. What was 5 years ago something that sat on the roof of a whole car is now something I've got in my bag and I can put on the desk and capture Street View imagery wherever I might be. Now, so we've talked a lot about how important the mobile phone was as that connection to the net, connection to all the information that's there. There's another element that makes the smartphone incredibly powerful, and that's the fact that it's really personal. It's something that has become an extension of our own personalities. Okay, everyone take your smartphones out. I know you've been tweeting on them anyway, but take your smartphones out. Everyone done that? Okay, give the smartphone to the person sitting next to you. Oh, you're very trusting, okay? How do you feel? A bit insecure, maybe? A little bit insecure? Very nice. I hope all of you have got a lock on your mobile phone. All right, give them back. I can see you panicking a little bit. You begin to feel a little bit insecure because those phones store a lot of your life on them. And I'm going to give you just a few tips for life now. Make sure your phone has a lock on it, obviously a screen lock. But go beyond that. How many of you have got phones that are encrypted? Do you know they're encrypted? It's important because your phone has, the SIM card that's got all the phone numbers that you've dialed over the last probably, most average SIM cards store phone numbers for about the last 2 years. So every phone number that you've made in the last 2 years is on the SIM card on your phone. It also has all the messages you might have taken. It's got your contact details of the people that you love and you interact with. It's got all your email on it. It's got your photographs you've taken. And obviously, perhaps more importantly than anything else, it's got your location. and stores your location. So what's really important is, yes, to have a lock on it, but also to make sure that your phone is encrypted. And if your phone's not encrypted, please do go and search, how do I encrypt my phone? And it will give you the information on how to do it. Most modern smartphones, if you bought your smartphone in the last 2 years, if it's not encrypted by default, it will be easily encryptable. And the reason this is important is if your phone's lost, when we lose our phones, people will not be able to get the data off. And that includes the police or anybody else. You know, the encryption on modern smartphones is very, very strong. It's not something that someone can break into. So please do, you know, public information, good idea to encrypt your phone because it contains all that personal information. Another place where all your personal information is online, perhaps. If you have Google accounts, you've got Gmail, or you share your photos, a lot of really valuable information to you is online. And in many ways, being online is probably more secure than it is just on your phone. It's harder to lose a big data center, but it's quite easy to lose your mobile phone. For an indication of the information that Google has about you, go to myaccount.google.com when you've logged in, and it will show you all the information that Google knows about you. And it allows you to modify it, to edit it, to delete stuff that's wrong, or just to say, I don't want you to know that about me anymore. And there's always a switch. You can switch off individual elements. So again, public information, go to myaccount.google.com. Why this is important is because that information about you as an individual is increasingly being used to customize the information that's presented to you. All that information that's in the cloud, a lot of it about you, we can use who you are to make the information more contextual. Here's an example. This is an email I got, really. This is just me. From British Airways saying, your ticket receipt, because I just bought a ticket to go up and see my daughter, it says, you know, your flight, London Heathrow to Edinburgh, the 14th of February. That's when I'm going up to see her. So, it's weekend coming. Now, when I look on Google Maps, and I look at Edinburgh Airport plus the date and the time of my arrival appears on Google Maps. So my version of Google Maps is going to be different to your version of Google Maps because you're not flying to Edinburgh on that date. But what Google Maps has done is looked into my email, extracted that information and presented it on the map. It will do the same if you have bookings for hotels or you've got meetings at particular institutions. Your Google Map now is very much personalized to you based on that sharing of information between those two applications. Another way you might look at this is that information in this kind of cloud of real-time content starts to provide you with, you know, what are, I suppose, superpowers, things that you couldn't normally achieve if you weren't connected into this personalized network of information. Behind the scenes, for example, as I say, we were monitoring traffic speeds all the time based on people's mobile phones. You know, anonymously, every few minutes is pinging, this is how fast I'm traveling. This is over a period of time about this particular section of road just north of Nashville. Now, this graphic here is a little bit complicated to read, but the width of the road is that distance there, and time starts at the top and then works its way down. So you can imagine a kind of a trace of data as time progresses. So at the top there, you can see it's kind of mostly green, traffic's moving, not a problem. And then you can start to see this yellow bit, and then you start to see some more red. Red means there's no movement at all. So over a period, in this case it was a period of about 20 minutes, that's what that line represents, we picked up an accident. An accident had happened, I think it was a truck had gone off the road and spilled his load, and the whole traffic jam. So it took us, it took the computer automatically about 90 seconds to recognize that something was wrong with the traffic. It wasn't usual. It then took about another 2 minutes for that data then to appear on Google Maps. So within about 3 minutes, anyone else using Google Maps would know that there was then that accident, the road was blocked, and automatically they would start to be navigated on different routes. They'd be navigated on different routes because this information would then pop up on their mobile device saying, okay, I know you're going on this particular route, but now something's happened, it's quicker to go in a different direction. Now, this is not something that you as an individual driver would ever have to hand if it wasn't for this network effect of people contributing more information as they're interacting with the real world. Here's another example. This is on my mobile phone, me at home in southwest London, being told that it's now time to leave to get to the airport, to get my flight to San Francisco, which is departing on time. But for the public transport, there's a bus coming that's going to take 57 minutes to get to the airport. It will depart at 11:57. It's 2 minutes walk from where you currently are. So there we've got lots of information, some of it very personal to me, some of it real-time content that's coming from other sources on the internet, all being brought together and presented to me in one place at one particular point in time. Now, the location is key to this because that's a piece of information that's only relevant at a particular time and at a particular place, not relevant at any other time. An even better example is this. This is something that would pop up on my smartphone as I was walking up the stairs to the platform at St Pancras to get the train to Paris. It's saying, okay, for your departure to Paris-Lille on the TGV 7033, i.e. the Eurostar train, your reservation is for carriage 6, seat 56. Now, I'm only really interested in which carriage am I sitting on and which seat am I sitting in when I'm at the station. That information is not really very interesting to me half an hour before, and it's certainly not interesting to me half an hour later. It's only interesting to me at that point in time and space, and that's when it's presented. That's bringing all of that content together and saying, now this is the most important piece of information to you. And literally, as you're walking along the platform, your phone will, your watch will buzz, and you can look and it will tell you that piece of information that's relevant to you. Likewise, if I'm driving, in this case, I have not got any directions associated. I'm just got the phone switched on and it's giving me a world view of the traffic and the information around me as I'm driving. This is something that we're trying to develop now, saying, okay, even if you don't have a particular destination in mind, there might be information about the traffic around you that is important to you that will present to you as you're driving. So it's kind of a global, operational awareness view. Okay, I promised you 2 topics. That was the world in your pocket. This is the second topic. In many ways related to the first topic, the end of computers. Who remembers that? The original IBM PC. Someone used them? Yeah. These things were floppy disks. Amazing the number of people you have to explain what a floppy disk is to. Floppy disk, yeah. So, the original IBM XT, 1980s, that's what a computer looks like. And if we think in terms of a computer, that's probably still what we think about, something that looks like a box and a screen and a keyboard. But in reality, now, most computers look like this. That 1.4 billion smartphones sold, there are less than 100 million computers sold every year. There are over 1 billion smartphones sold. Very different. This is what the computing platform is today. Particularly in the developing world, you talk about a computer, that's what it will look like. That's how you will interact with the services that we all interact with every day. That's how you will create your presentations, do your finances, on that device. But in many ways that device is just a shrunk down version of the PC. We think of it in the same terms, and although it has all those wonderful capabilities in terms of knowing where it is and having a camera and so on, we still largely think of it as a traditional computer, something you sit in front of and you interact with. That is going to change. Increasingly, computers look like this. This is a Philips Hue light bulb. I have loads of these at home. They connect to my Wi-Fi and they connect to all the other devices that I have at home and the devices in the cloud, and they basically switch themselves on and off, and they change color depending upon the time of day, My kids were quite freaked a couple of days ago when the smoke detectors detected that my wife was burning toast, and suddenly all the lights started flashing yellow to say, there's a warning. But all these devices are now connected to each other. They don't have a traditional user interface. There's no keyboard. It's something that it connects to the cloud and it connects to other services. Where computers are probably at the moment, down shrunk in size and capability is this. This is a Bluetooth LE module. It's something that you can interact with your devices. If you look at your name badges, you look at the M in the GIM logo, that Bluetooth module is about the same size as the M. That's how big it is. That's what you'll interact with when you walk around shops, when you walk around airports in the future. These things will be embedded in almost everything that has a power supply. Almost everything that you interact with will have one of these little devices in it, and it will interact with the other devices around you. It will allow you to change the environment around you depending upon what you're doing. They don't look like computers. In many ways, they look more like sensors, and indeed, perhaps they are more like sensors, because the computing capability exists in the cloud. The cloud contains information about you, it contains massive processing capabilities, it contains real-time content, and the way that you will interact with those computers, interact with the cloud, is just by moving around and interacting with them. We're beginning to see this slowly developing infrastructure emerge today. So here's my mobile device. This I carry around with me all the time. This is the thermostat that controls the temperature in my house. It's connected via Wi-Fi to the cloud the same way my phone is. The Wi-Fi sensor connected into the thermostat, it knows when I'm home or not. It will automatically switch the heating off if there's nobody home. It also knows it takes about half an hour to heat my house up. So what happens now today, when my phone is half an hour from home, the heating is automatically switched on. It's based on a geofence. It knows that once I get to a particular position, it's now time to switch the heating on. That saves me about 5% of my energy bill every year by not heating the house when it doesn't need to be heated. And if we talk about smart cities and building, the infrastructures of the smart city, it's these very small incremental steps at a very personal, individual level that will make the difference. Okay. We've heard about, how many devices that are going to be connected. Is it 50 billion, 20 billion? I'm going to be conservative. These are Gartner's numbers from last year. By 2020, there will be 20 billion devices connected to the internet. Remember, we're just about 5 billion now, so it's quite a lot more. Final thoughts. And this is, I think, where it gets really interesting. Here's one of Google's autonomous vehicles. This works, obviously, by having a map of the world that it navigates through. It works by having very sophisticated sensors that sense the world around it. And it works by being a network device. It's connected in real time to the internet, and it's talking to other cars that are driving around. And we think about this as being, well, it's a car, isn't it? It's the natural evolution of all the cars that we currently drive. But actually, it's much more than that. Of course, this would not work without the underlying geospatial technology that we're all aware of, but that's a small part of it. What is the societal impact of this going to be? Chances are we'll never own an autonomous vehicle. Why would you? Imagine now if I want to get to Schiphol Airport, I just say, well, I want to get to Schiphol Airport on my phone, and an autonomous vehicle will come pick me up and take me to Schiphol Airport. If I'm at home and I want to take the kids to school, I'll just use my autonomous vehicle for the period of time I want to go from home to school and then back again. Think of how that's different to the current car you've got at home, which spends most of its life sitting outside your house or sitting inside the garage, not going anywhere, just depreciating in value while it's sitting there. You're not using it. These smartphones will radically change the way we own vehicles. And if we don't own vehicles, we don't need to park vehicles outside our house or park vehicles when we go shopping. So the future cities won't have car parks because you don't need a car park, because you don't own a car. Cars only operate when they're in business, they're doing stuff. If you don't need car parks and then you're using these as your primary mode of transport, perhaps mass transit systems will change in their design. These technologies will have a fundamental impact on the way society interacts and therefore what cities of the future will look like. We talk about the availability of networking. Obviously, it's still difficult to plug cables everywhere around the world. So we've been looking at different sorts of technology to provide internet access wirelessly. And this is Project Loon, our project to connect Wi-Fi hotspots, in effect, or network hubs on balloons. And these things float around in the stratosphere, and they float basically in different directions. We look at the climate models, we look at the meteorology in the jet streams, and we move these things up and down to move them over a particular place in the world. This, again, is a technology that can only work because of the underlying geospatial technology that we've all developed. Because this is really an issue of modeling the location and the coverage of a network of devices that you have control over. And you can control them, well, a computer will control where they are, but it gives you the ability to provide internet access to places that have never had it before. Again, very much dependent on that underlying geospatial technology. Where this all comes together, and this idea of the web of things, the internet of things, I think boils down to this, which is one of my favourite quotes by Mark Wisner. The most profound technologies are those that disappear, in the same way that geospatial technology has now largely disappeared. They weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life until they are indistinguishable from it. Now, you could argue that's probably almost the case now with geospatial technology. It's become embedded in mass market applications that we don't really know that it's there. We don't know that when we search for a plumber on Google, your location, the location of the plumber is actually all identified, worked out algorithmically, manipulated, and you're presented then with a list of plumbers that are nearby to you. It goes on behind the scenes. But perhaps where this is going to be most fundamental is in the end of computers. The computer interface of the future will look like this. It will just look like the street. We will interact with the computer devices that are in our bicycles, that are in the shops, in the advertising hoardings, at the railway station, in the hotel room, just by moving around them. We will carry a device around with us, maybe our smartphone, maybe a smart watch, who knows, maybe something embedded in our bodies that identifies who we are. And that's all it needs to do. Then everything that we interact with that's connected to the internet will know who we are, know the products and services that we're interested in, and we will just literally interact with them. Checking into this hotel, I would walk up to the hotel room and just open the door, because it would only open for me. And it would know it was me, know my reservation. None of this faffing around with printing out pieces of paper or holding up our phone against the door. All of that interaction will disappear. We will interact with the devices around us because they know who we are, and all the information about us and our bookings and our interests and the weather is all held online, and we will interact with that physical environment as we work our way through it. So the computer will be the world around us. It won't be a box that we go and sit in front of to interact with. That's fundamentally different. And society working with that sort of really truly ambient technology will be very different to the society potentially of today. And what's powering that at that almost invisible level is geospatial technology. It's that ability to know where things are relative to everywhere else. Because everything fundamentally is somewhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed.